The opinion has become popular that Korean coaches would be good imports. So people are saying that on a large scale, and if we can bring as many coaches from Korea as we can, that would be a good thing. That we should pay these blockbuster salaries and do whatever we can to get these Korean coaches over. People think that because Korea is historically the best country or the most successful country in esports, at least in games that they really dive into. Especially in League of Legends, they've been wildly successful. And we do import Korean players. There's been many Korean players that we've imported. A lot to NA, quite a few to Korea. Some big names like Ryu, Piglet. There's been many others, GBM, and there's speculated to be more coming in the coming season, in the next season of LCS. And so, because we bring these import Korean players, but because many times they're very good, and I'm not disputing that. I'm a very vocal critic of the West in League of Legends, and I do acknowledge certainly that Korea has been much more successful, and there's much more talent and better players there. They think that because of the success of Korea, that since we're importing these Korean players, therefore we should be importing many Korean coaches as well. And that if we bring Korean coaches, they will be just as successful, more successful, very successful, whatever the wording is. But they think that Korean coaches is a great idea. And I have major problems with this notion. And my grievances with the idea come from a lot of different angles. It's not a single point of contention, but it's all over the place. A lot of it has to do with Korean culture. A lot of it has to do with American culture, how the two link up. But let's start to get into it. Number one, Koreans are known for being very tied to their culture. People will think that I'm saying some sort of like racist shit against Koreans. Not at all. Not at all. First of all, I'm like a Korea boo, and I'm like 10% Korean, so shut the fuck up. Second, Koreans are known, they like need Korean food. I mean, I'm not saying that as a joke. I mean, like they literally, Koreans are known for being very tied to their food, and they'll literally have, and this is a generality, of course, I'm not saying this about every single Korean human being, but they generally need to have their traditional food, and if they don't feel at home almost, in a way. It's like a part of who they are, the food that they have from home. And you can ask any Korean person from Korea, they will tell you this. Even a lot of Korean people that live here. If they had to not eat Korean food for the rest of their life, they would go insane. And that's a hyperbole, of course. Now, cultural withdrawals are not as small a thing as many people might think. They think that you could probably get them some kimchi and some Korean potato chips and take them to Korean barbecue once in a while, and it'd probably be okay. Now, if you guys actually think that, I want you to put yourself in their position and go the other way around. Don't even imagine yourself going to another Western country like France or something if you're from the United States, or going to the United States from, let's just say, Spain. These are all Western countries, but Eastern and Western have a lot of differences. So if you were to go to Korea and work there, and you had people expecting the exact same level of output and your work as if you were at home in Korea, you'd have a lot of obstacles. You wouldn't be able to just go outside and talk to people in your native language. I know if I went to Korea, I wouldn't be able to go to In-N-Out if I wanted to. I love going to In-N-Out. But I wouldn't have that same creature comfort. I couldn't go talk to my mom and my dad all the time. I'd have to stay up till like 2 a.m. and try to Skype them, and I'd feel all shitty when I'm doing it because I've been up all night waiting to talk. I don't know if you guys have girlfriends. You wouldn't be able to talk to your girlfriend all the time You wouldn't be around her. I wouldn't have my car. I wouldn't have all my friends around me. I wouldn't have all the same restaurants, all the same movie theaters. I want to go watch a movie. Half the time, it's not even in English. So all the things that you take for granted being at home, you would not have that there, and that would weigh on you. You'd be homesick, and it could have legitimate effects on how you perform in your job. Okay, and another thing in terms of Korean culture is the social structure in Korea. So in Korea, this is a very surface thing, but there's two types of sentence structures. So there's the regular sentence structure in Korean and then the formal sentence structure. And that came about partially, in part, because Korean social structure is very rigid. So if you have somebody who is above you in terms of age or in terms of like your job, so if they're above you in terms of their position, like they're your manager, your boss, or your coach, it's not just demanded of you to have absolute respect, it is expected. So you have to talk a certain way to the people who are on top of you in terms of social structure. You have to use a very certain type of sentence structure, and you have to have a very politeful and respectful attitude. The United States is not like that at all. The United States is very egalitarian in the sense that everybody is considered equal, whether you're 60 or you're 16. You're supposed to have respect for your elders, but it's not at all at the level that Korea is. So coaches in Korea do not have to worry about players respecting them, at least in 99.999 repeating percent of players. So a Coma or one of these guys has never had to deal with a Dardoch level motherfucker. Like, they've never had a Sith Lord on their team killing everybody with lightsabers, killing the younglings. They don't have that experience. Western coaches, if you look at a job application for a Western coach, 90% of the time, at the very top of the application, their number one requirement is conflict resolution and player management. Which means what they want is they want somebody who can tell players to shut the fuck up. They can make the players respect them no matter how difficult the player is. They can control unruly personalities like a Dardoch and these types of guys. Like Soaz. If I had Soaz being coached by Coma in my imagination, I could just see like these two cultures clashing, this like wild Soaz and then the polite Coma, and then they're in champ select, and then Coma, he goes, Soaz, can you please lock in Renekton? And then Soaz just looks at him and he goes, Renekton is shit. And then he locks like Lysandra or some shit. I mean, I could see a world where like Coma doesn't really understand what Soaz said, and then he goes like, oh, I guess he just misheard me, and then like he goes, all right guys, let's draft around the Lysandra now, and like he doesn't even realize that Soaz is telling him to fuck off a bit, essentially. So there's a legitimate clash of cultures here, where I don't think a lot of people have accounted for. Korean coaches don't have this experience, and that's one of the most important thing we need in a Western coach. Have you guys seen Breaking Point, the Liquid movie? It takes really high level conflict management and coaching to make a lot of these teams tick. Otherwise, if you throw somebody in who can't communicate correctly with his people, even if they could with their own language, maybe they could fix it if everybody spoke Korean, but maybe they can't because there's a language barrier. They're just throwing another wrench into this fucked up system. So I don't think it's that simple. Another problem I have with this whole Korean thing is that in Korea, these coaches have a really big structure around them because esports has been around in Korea for a very, very long time. Probably over 10 years. Yeah, definitely over 10 years because of Bird War and all that. And the coaching structure, it's legit. And when I say structure, I mean it in like as literal a sense as I can in terms of a coaching structure. Like if you join a Korean team as coaching staff, you may join as an analyst or like an assistant coach or maybe a positional coach, and then you work your way up to one of the normal coaches, and then you may work yourself up to a head coach, and then above the head coach there's like the old guy who's like the manager or the organizational coach. So the assistant coach and the analyst, those are just like entry-level guys. You get up to the normal guys, and then the head coach is like a coma, or these guys are the faces of the coaching staff, the main guys. And then the head coach is like a old guy who probably a lot of times don't play the games. They're for general like coaching theory and coaching advice, and there to provide a general philosophical basis for the coaches and the organization to run off of, but they don't deal with in-game stuff. So they don't look at like, let's just say the CJ head coach, the top guy, he sees Coco picking a terrible champion. He wouldn't go in and tell him, hey, you need to pick Victor from now on. He doesn't do that. He's more of a philosophical guy, and therefore advice and to support the head coaches and the other coaching staff. So there's a lot of structure that helps these guys perform well, the coaches in Korea. It's not just that they're Korean and they have squinty eyes and that means they're good. There's a lot that goes into it, and a lot of structure and a lot of tenure that these head coaches have. So they're experienced, and they have people around them who are experienced helping them as they have difficulties. Now, one of the final things I have to say about this whole Korean coaching thing is that communicating with people is very important, especially at work. I mean, in real life, if you're living with people, you have to be able to communicate well and get your point across the way it's meant to be spoken and communicated. You want people to understand the words the way you meant to give them to that person. So if I'm telling you something, if I tell you X and then the way you get it is Y, there hasn't been effective communication. So as just a side note, obviously, if a guy is from Korea and he's coaching these Western people, so it could be Americans in NA, it could be Swedish guys or French guys or Spanish guys or whatever in EU, then there's going to be difficulty in communicating. And so in Europe, there could literally be a situation like this, and this is no joke. This could literally happen. So in Europe, there could be a Korean coach speaking to like a Korean translator because he doesn't speak English, and then the English translator, the Korean translator is able to translate it like 90% correctly. It basically has all the major points, maybe like some of the adjectives he didn't use correctly, or it's just like 10% off, but basically it gets the point across. And then that translator in English, he tells it to a Swedish player on the team, and then the Swedish player understands it like probably like 85-90%. And then the Swedish player tells it he heard it in English, and then he starts telling it in Swedish, and then he tells it about like 95% or 90% correctly. And then he gets the last Swedish guy, and then by the time he hears it, he understands about 95%. But by the time it's gotten to that last guy, the Korean coach's words have been modified, or it's been like slightly changed in weird ways where the adverbs or the adjectives aren't what they should be, or little things like that. And then with all these little percentages adding up, these 5s and 10%, by the time it gets to the last guy, it's half changed. I mean, that's a real thing. It's like it's like a horror show where, like, it's not children playing for fun, it's adults playing for their livelihoods, and they're all losing their jobs. So that could really happen. And even if I'm taking it to the extreme level, where there's like 5 people playing this game of telephone, even in situations where it's like 1 or 2 people, it's the same thing, just to a lesser degree. And then, just as a final point, I don't think importing Korean coaches is all bad. Reaper, the coach for Cloud9, he seems like he's doing a good job, not a great job. It's not like his team is greater than the sum of their parts. It seems like they're just doing fine. And in situations where you do have Korean players on your team, having a Korean coach may have its benefits, because you have somebody who can translate, somebody who can relate to each other. In fact, the two would relate to each other, so that is good for them because they don't have other Korean people around them all the time. But I do think there are great Western coaches already. I think Zix is one of the sickest coaches in esports. The guy is taking like 2s out of 10 and 3s out of 10, and maybe one guy who's like 6 out of 10 and one guy that's an 8 out of 10, and he's getting the most you could possibly get out of those players. It's insane. And even the people who I criticize intensely, I criticize Weldon so much on Twitter. I've been making fun of Leviathan also for the past day or two. I still think a lot of these guys are quite good, even though I like to shit on them, basically. So what I think is, if you're going to advocate or pressure teams, or if you are a team owner and you're going to hire a Korean coach, don't think it's sunshine and rainbows just because you hire some guy from Korea. Same with importing Korean players, by the way. You have to set them up for success. They are not gods. They are human beings, and we need to treat them like that. So, as the title says, Kimchi Coaches. They're not just Kimchi Coaches. They're real people, and I want you guys to remember that.